There used to be a time when like the hermit, I guess the lone wolf hermit, whatever you want to call it, was actually a revered member of a society. Take ancient tribes such as the Dogon, for instance, with the shaman. The shaman is traditionally a hermit in ancient tribes such as the Dogon. In fact, in many ways, he's forbidden to interact with normal society because they think that it would hinder his mystical abilities to sort of peer into the other side and what have you. And there's other cultures, such as monks, for instance. Although monks are a community, however, there were other instances in which monks were more sort of solo, they're sort of lone wolves. So the term lone wolf didn't, you know, I need to research this, but I'm pretty sure the term lone wolf initially was a positive thing. It did not have a negative connotation. And now we see, with all these false flags, serial killers and whatnot, it's like now the term lone wolf is meant as a negative, as a derogatory thing to sort of lambast anyone who's sort of like a solo, eccentric type individual, and to sort of paint them in a villainous light. So now it's just like you see people everywhere suspecting, the sort of loner hermit types in their communities as potential whatever villains of one form or the other. This is a very American phenomenon. The ancient tribes of like thousands of years ago, or probably even in Greek Roman days, probably even in like medieval Christian days, Shakespearean days, the hermit would not have been revered in such a negative light. Now hermits are pretty much always feared as villains. And I wonder if that itself is not a conspiracy. Another part of this overall conspiracy, like I said before, to put so much fear into people's heads that they fear their own community members, essentially. What if it's also a conspiracy to fear the hermit, to fear the lone wolf? Because if the ancient Dogon tribe, for instance, and other tribes that have shamans in their societies, if there's any truth to how they are, I mean, some people need to be alone in order to properly connect to the spirit world, for instance. Maybe their gifts work best when they're alone. Now, take me, for instance. I have friends and stuff, but like I said earlier, I don't really need to be around people. It's just not a necessity in my life. It's just the way I am. So basically, I'm a lone wolf. Oh, shock horror! I must be a villain then, right? I see myself as a shaman of sorts, but whereas a traditional shaman is out in the forest, chanting and communing directly to God or what have you. My preferred style of magic is music and art. That's how I express the divine. That's how I connect to the source. And I do work with people at times, but I do find that I work best alone. Some people are like that. And now we live in a culture where exceedingly hermits, loner types are looked at with fear. And I think that could be a systematic effort to perhaps further demonize what could actually be a very important role in society, that of the hermit magician, the hermetic. And obviously we're living in an increasingly atheistic society. There's no doubt that that's clearly an agenda being pushed, is to divide us from the spiritual. And there are instances in which spirituality is better conveyed through community, but there are definitely those types who traditionally were called hermetics, who operate better alone. They connect better to the source alone. And I feel that in many ways I am such a person. But it's part of this greater thing, like why in this society, in this community, for instance, my community, I am looked at with like fear, partially because I am kind of a loner. I would say even if I never had my past problems with alcohol, I would say just the fact that I'm kind of a lone, eccentric type guy probably would have been enough to elicit fear in some people. And I guess it's not really their fault. I just think people are only the result of their teaching, of their programming, and that's just the way it is. I guess in some ways all you can do is just try to inform people correctly and try to wash their brain away from the misinformation. So yes, there's definitely an anti-spiritual agenda, and perhaps this sort of constant demonizing, these false flags that are there to sort of consistently, time after time, demonize and villainize the loner as a consistently violent individual. And perhaps this is a subconscious attempt at just villainizing hermits in general, to sort of downgrade their what good they can contribute to society. What if our modern day society, was still in some ways like the ancient times, where these lone wolf hermit magicians, if you will, these shamans, were actually revered in society. It could actually prove to be very beneficial to society. But everyone's afraid of being alone, partially because they don't want to be seen as that one weird person, that one weird loner, because of this programming. We've been divided so far from our own spirituality, and in many ways, while I think Christianity is well-meaning, I do the conspiracy theory that goes that the Christian church was infiltrated by Illuminati elements. I think there's probably a lot of truth to that. I think it's something that probably happened probably about 1,000 years ago. I believe that in the beginning, one of the more perfect variations of Christianity was the Gnostics, who were essentially the shamanic grassroots version of Christianity. And I think in its original incarnation, it was more pure. But it got more popular, it got more famous, and then by the time the Vatican came into existence, it became infiltrated by darker elements who then decided to use it for control, and ultimately, in this society, profit. And I think modern day Christianity probably does more harm than good, because it's disconnected from its original Gnostic shamanic roots, and it's very like community oriented, which is fine. But I think that when you downgrade the importance of the hermetic, of the lone shaman in a spiritual society, you're losing a very crucial piece of the puzzle, because there's something to be said for the shaman's role, because they, in many cases, are able to peer into dimensions that not everyone can peer into. They can discover hidden truths that wouldn't be obvious to everyone. They can peel away the layers of reality more easily, whereas not everyone can do that. So I think the shaman's role in ancient societies was very important, and I think that it should be brought back into society. And I definitely think that, like, this fear of the hermit, this fear of the loner, is part of this greater agenda to villainize the hermit.
Mr. Cooper, there's one thing you gotta know about Laura Palmer, and it's this. She likes to subscribe to Zon Roberts' channel. Right around here is where the subscribe button is, so Mr. Cooper, please go ahead and do that, or anyone else who's interested. Or right up here is a video. It's usually gonna be some sort of alternative, progressive, experimental psalm performance, or it's gonna be a music video, or it'll be a surreal comedy skit, or it's gonna be a discussion, alright? And right here is gonna be something similar to that, or a playlist. Maybe the playlist will be right here. Okay, subscribe, bitches!